In this video, I'm going to tell you a story that will chill you to the bone. A story that will make you think twice before buying a house at too good a price. Stay seated because what you're about to hear today might just keep you awake tonight, Thomas. Moreau had just signed the papers for his new house. A 3-story Victorian mansion located in the quiet suburb of Willowbrook. The real estate agent had been particularly eager to close the sale, offering a ridiculously low price for this 150 square meter property. Thomas, an architect by profession, had immediately been seduced by the ornate moldings and period parquet floors that adorned each room. Yet one thing had intrigued him since his first visit. A door without a handle on the second floor wedged between the master bedroom and the bathroom. When he had questioned the agent about this, the man had looked away while mumbling something about an old sealed closet. Thomas had shrugged, telling himself he could easily solve this mystery once moved in. On moving day, Thomas found himself alone with his boxers in this house that suddenly seemed much larger than in his memories. The projected shadows from the century-old garden trees danced strangely on the walls, creating disturbing shapes that seemed to move of their own will. He began by unpacking his belongings in the living room, installing his bookcase near the large stone fireplace that dominated the room. Each book he placed on the shelves resonated in the oppressive silence of the house, as if the walls themselves absorbed all sounds. Around 6 o'clock, exhausted from the move, Thomas decided to order a pizza and postpone the rest of the unpacking until the next day. This first night was strange, punctuated by unexplained creaking that seemed to come from the upper floors. Thomas told himself it was normal in an old house, that the wood worked with temperature variations. Yet around 3 in the morning, he was awakened by what sounded like footsteps on the stairs. He got up, heart pounding, and listened in the darkness. The silence had returned, but a strange sensation inhabited him, as if someone else was in the house. He turned on the light in his bedroom and inspected the corridors, but found nothing abnormal. Only the door without a handle caught his eye, seeming to defy him silently. The next morning, Thomas decided to tackle the mystery of this locked door. He carefully examined the dark wood panel, looking for a hidden mechanism or trace of the former handle. The door was perfectly smooth, as if it had been sanded and varnished recently. Thomas ran his hand over the entire surface, finding only a slight vertical groove on the right side, barely perceptible to the touch. He went back to get his tools from the garage and returned with a screwdriver and wood chisel. Carefully, he slipped the screwdriver into the groove and applied slight pressure. To his great surprise, the door opened without resistance, revealing a room plunged in darkness. The smell that escaped from the room was indescribable, a mixture of mold and something more disturbing, something organic and putrid. Thomas instinctively stepped back, bringing his hand to his nose to filter this nauseating stench. He went to get a flashlight and illuminated the interior of the mysterious room. What he discovered left him speechless. The room was perfectly furnished and decorated, as if someone had lived there recently. A canopy bed sat in the center, covered with sheets yellowed by time. On the nightstand, a half-empty glass of water, and an open book seemed to await their owner's return. The walls were lined with old photographs, always showing the same woman at different ages of her life. Thomas carefully approached the bed and noticed a human imprint perfectly drawn on the sheets, as if someone had lain there recently. The photograph showed a woman with piercing black eyes who seemed to look directly at him regardless of the angle from which he observed them. On the desk near the window, a diary was open to a page dated October 15th, 1999. Thomas approached and read the fine, careful handwriting that covered the page. The words described a sensation of imprisonment and despair, mentioning someone who changed the house every night to prevent the author from leaving. The last sentence was particularly disturbing. Someone else must take my place. I can no longer bear this prison of wood and stone. Troubled by this discovery, Thomas quickly closed the door and blocked it with a chair. He spent the rest of the day searching for information about the house's history, and discovered that it had belonged to a certain Eleanor Blackwood. This woman had mysteriously disappeared in October 1999, leaving behind an apparently empty house. Police searches had yielded nothing, and the case had been closed without follow-up. Thomas realized with horror that the photographs in the secret room very likely represented Eleanor Blackwood herself. If you feel this tension rising in you as you listen to this story, if your heart beats a little faster, then you'll understand why it's essential that this channel grows to bring you even more thrills. Don't hesitate to subscribe and activate the notification bell, because your support gives us the strength to continue exploring the darkest corners of human imagination. By the way, don't forget to check out the link in the description to participate in the channel's exclusive giveaways. You could win surprises that will make you shiver with pleasure as much as fear. That night, Thomas had trouble falling asleep, haunted by the image of Eleanor's black eyes that seemed to follow him everywhere. Around 2 in the morning, he was awakened by strange noises, as if someone was moving furniture in the house. He got up and turned on the light, but everything seemed normal in his room. Yet when he went out into the hallway, he had the feeling that something had changed. The arrangement of rooms seemed different to him, as if the walls had slightly moved during his sleep. He shook his head, telling himself it was his imagination playing tricks on him after the troubling discovery of the day. The next morning, Thomas discovered with stupefaction that his kitchen had changed places. What was yesterday to the right of the entrance was now to the left, and the arrangement of the cupboards was totally different. He rushed to the living room and found that his bookcase had disappeared, replaced by a grand piano he had never seen before. He ran throughout the house and realized that each room had been reorganized according to a logic that completely escaped him. Even the door to the secret room had changed places, now located on the ground floor, near the main entrance. Thomas immediately called the real estate agent, but the number was no longer assigned. He went to the agency indicated on the sales documents and discovered an empty space with a for rent sign in the window. No one in the neighborhood seemed to know Blackwood and Associates agency, as if it had never existed. Thomas was beginning to realize that he had fallen into a supernatural trap whose full implications he didn't yet understand. He returned home, determined to solve this mystery before the situation became totally uncontrollable. The secret room was now accessible from the living room, and Thomas decided to explore it more thoroughly. He discovered in Eleanor's desk a notebook filled with plans detailed of the house with strange annotations in the margins. Each page showed a different configuration of the rooms, as if the house could reconfigure at will. The annotations spoke of a spirit of the place that fed on the confusion and fear of its inhabitants. Eleanor had tried to map the nocturnal changes of the house for years. Seeking a way to break this infernal cycle, Thomas read with fascination and horror the last pages of Eleanor's notebook. She described how the house had started with small changes after she had opened the secret room. At first, it was just objects that changed places, then furniture that moved slightly. But over the weeks, the transformations had become more drastic and more frequent. Eleanor mentioned nights when she got lost in her own house, wandering for hours in corridors that didn't exist the day before. She also spoke of voices in the walls, whispers that called her by name and promised her freedom if she found someone else to take her place. That night, Thomas decided to stay awake to observe the real-time changes. He settled in the living room with a notebook and pencil, ready to document anything that might happen. Around midnight, he felt a strange vibration in the air, as if the house itself was breathing. The walls began to emit dull, creaking sounds, and Thomas saw with horror the partitions moving slowly, reconfiguring the space around him. The living room alternately expanded and contracted, while new doors appeared on walls that were empty just minutes before. Thomas tried to leave the house, but every time he thought he had found the front door, it had disappeared or led to another room. The windows he broke closed instantly, as if the glass regenerated by itself. He was prisoner in this living labyrinth that transformed according to the will of an invisible force. Hours passed, and Thomas wandered in corridors that stretched to infinity, on stairs that led nowhere, in rooms that had no exit. He thought he heard Eleanor's voice calling him from the depths of the house, promising to help him if he agreed to free her. At dawn, Thomas found himself inexplicably in the secret room, sitting on Eleanor's bed. The diary was open before him, and he realized with horror that a new page had been added. His own name appeared at the top of the page, followed by handwriting he recognized as his own, but which he had not traced. The words described his first night of imprisonment in the house. Using exactly the same terms that Eleanor had used years before, Thomas understood that he was now bound to this house in the same way Eleanor had been, condemned to endure its nocturnal transformations until he found someone else to take his place. The following days transformed into a repetitive nightmare, where Thomas desperately tried to escape from his prison of wood and stone. Each morning, the house resumed a normal configuration. But as soon as night fell, began its terrifying metamorphoses. Thomas discovered that Eleanor was still present in the house, trapped like him in this infernal cycle. She sometimes appeared to him in the form of a translucent silhouette that wandered in the corridors, eternally seeking an exit that didn't exist. Their nocturnal conversations revealed the horrible truth about the nature of the house. Eleanor explained to him that the building had been constructed on the site of an old psychiatric asylum that had burned in 1872. Dozens of patients had died in the fire, their souls remaining trapped in the soil, saturated with suffering and despair. When the house had been built 50 years later, it had absorbed this negative energy, becoming a living entity fed by confusion and fear. The secret room was the heart of this entity, the place where all its malevolence was concentrated. However, opened, it automatically became a prisoner of the house, condemned to feed its thirst for terror, until death ensued or a new victim took their place. Thomas learned that Eleanor had herself replaced a man named Harold Vincent, who had gone mad. After 20 years of imprisonment in the house, before him, it was a woman called Margaret Stone who had suffered the same fate for 15 years. The list went back to the 1820s, each victim leaving behind traces of their passage in the secret room. Thomas discovered their diaries, hidden in various corners of the room, all telling the same story of horror and despair. Some had tried to commit suicide to escape their fate, but the house had forcibly kept them alive, feeding on their suffering, week after week. Thomas felt his mental sanity crumble under the constant pressure of these nocturnal transformations. He had stopped eating regularly, sometimes forgetting for entire days to nourish himself. His reflection in the mirrors showed a man with prematurely white hair and haggard eyes, aged several years in just a few months. The house seemed to take malicious pleasure in creating increasingly complex and destabilizing configurations. Sometimes, it created illusions of exits that actually led to deadly traps, bottomless pits, or walls that closed in on fugitives. Thomas discovered in the previous journals that there might be a way to break the cycle without condemning a new victim. Harold Vincent had mentioned a hidden key somewhere in the house, key that could permanently unlock the secret room and free all the imprisoned souls. But the search for this key was made almost impossible by the constant transformations of the house. Thomas spent months searching every corner, every possible hiding place, but the key remained unfindable. He was beginning to lose hope when Eleanor revealed to him a crucial detail she had kept secret for all these years. The key was not a physical object, but rather a state of mind, a total acceptance of the situation that would allow transcending the house's grip. Eleanor explained that she had never been able to reach this state because she was too attached to her former life, too eager to return to the outside world. To break the cycle, one had to completely accept their imprisonment, cease fighting against the house, and totally embrace its supernatural nature. This revelation plunged Thomas into a deep moral dilemma, because accepting meant abandoning all hope of returning to a normal life. But refusing condemned not only his own soul, but also those of all the previous victims who had been waiting for their liberation for more than a century. Thomas spent weeks meditating on this troubling revelation, weighing the pros and cons of this drastic solution. He observed Eleanor, who continued to wander in the house, her mind increasingly fragmented by decades of imprisonment. He saw the other ghosts that haunted the corridors, remnants of previous victims who had never managed to find peace. Faces expressed eternal suffering, despair so deep it became almost tangible. Thomas realized he couldn't leave them in this state, that he had to at least try to free them, even if it meant sacrificing his own humanity. One night, while the house was undergoing a particularly violent transformation, Thomas made his decision. He went to the secret room and knelt in the center of the room, closing his eyes and emptying his mind of all resistance. He fully accepted his condition as a prisoner, abandoning all desire for flight or return to normal. In this moment of total acceptance, he felt something change in the atmosphere of the house. The creaking gradually ceased, and a strange silence settled, different from the usual oppressive silence. The house began to shake violently, as if it were struggling against a force that was escaping it. The walls of the secret room began to glow with a golden light that grew in intensity. Thomas saw the spirits of the former victims appear around him, their faces finally expressing a serenity they hadn't known for decades. Eleanor approached him, her features transfigured by a deep peace she hadn't felt since her death. She placed a translucent hand on Thomas's shoulder and whispered words of gratitude before dissolving into the light. One by one, all the imprisoned ghosts followed Eleanor toward this liberating light, their souls finally delivered from their secular torment. Thomas felt a beneficent warmth invade him, as if his sacrifice was rewarded by a form of divine grace. The house completely stopped shaking, and the silence that settled was that of peace, not that of threat. When Thomas reopened his eyes, he found himself in a totally different room, bathed in natural and soothing light. Eleanor's photographs had disappeared, placed by images of all those he had helped find peace. Thomas discovered that he was no longer really human, but not a ghost. In the traditional sense either, he had become the guardian of the house, responsible for ensuring that never again would anyone be trapped by its malevolent influence. His new condition allowed him to control the transformations of the building, to direct them toward positive, rather than destructive ends. The house was still alive, but its nature had radically changed, passing from malevolence to benevolence. Thomas could now use his powers to help lost souls find their way to the light, transforming his prison into a sanctuary of redemption. Years passed, and Thomas developed a strange but satisfying routine in his new existence. He occasionally welcomed lost spirits seeking their way to the beyond, patiently guiding them toward eternal peace. The secret room had become a portal of light where troubled souls could find the rest. They had been seeking for sometimes centuries. Thomas learned to communicate with other guardians like himself, discovering an invisible network of protectors who watched over the haunted places of the entire world. His mission was clear: protect the innocent and help the dead find peace, transforming places of suffering into havens of serenity. One day, Thomas felt a familiar presence approaching the house, someone seeking to buy the property at a low price. He immediately recognized the signs, the same greed and the same carelessness that had led him to this destiny. But unlike what had happened with him, Thomas was now able to intervene directly to protect this new potential victim. He used his powers to make the house totally repulsive in the eyes of the potential buyer, creating nauseating odors and terrifying noises. The man fled before he could even sign the papers, convinced that the house was dangerously haunted. Thomas realized he had found his true vocation in this new existence, that of protector of the innocent against malevolent supernatural forces. He developed his abilities over time, learning to manipulate reality in subtle but effective ways. His house became a spiritual beacon for all those who needed help in their transition to the beyond. Other guardians sometimes came to visit him, sharing their experiences and techniques to better accomplish their common mission. Thomas had found a peace he had never known in life, a deep serenity born from the certainty of accomplishing something truly important. Decades passed, and Thomas became a legend among the supernatural entities of the region. His reputation as a benevolent guardian attracted the attention of secret organizations that studied the paranormal. Some researchers tried to approach the house, but Thomas always ensured to protect his tranquility by diverting their attention to other places. He preferred to remain in the shadows, silently accomplishing his mission without attracting the attention of the world of the living. His greatest satisfaction came from seeing the souls liberated by his care finally find the eternal rest they deserved. A century after his transformation, Thomas received an unusual visit from Eleanor, who had returned from the realm of light. To thank him personally, she explained to him that his sacrifice had had repercussions well beyond their house, creating a positive wave that had helped other haunted places find peace. Eleanor revealed to Thomas that there existed a spiritual hierarchy of which he was now part, a council of guardians that supervised the balance between the worlds of the living and the dead. His exceptional success earned him a promotion too, a position of greater responsibility, that of regional coordinator for all the guardians of the region. Thomas accepted this new mission with gratitude, realizing that his initial sacrifice had opened the way to a destiny he could never have imagined. Today, the house in Willowbrook still stands, but it no longer inspires the terror it once aroused. The rare people who approach it feel an inexplicable peace, as if the place were blessed by a benevolent force. Thomas continues his guardian mission, watching over lost souls and protecting the innocent from supernatural dangers. His secret room has become a sanctuary of light where troubled spirits finally find the rest they had been seeking for centuries. And sometimes on the clearest nights, one can glimpse a benevolent silhouette at the house's window, eternally watching over those who need protection. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest courage consists in accepting a destiny we didn't choose, and that even in the most desperate situations, there always exists a path toward redemption and peace. Thomas Moreau had bought a house at a low price and discovered it hid a terrible secret. But his courage and sacrifice transformed a curse into a blessing. The locked room that was once a deadly trap became a portal to freedom for all souls seeking peace. And somewhere in that house in Willowbrook, Thomas continues to watch, eternal protector of those who cannot defend themselves. For sometimes, the most frightening endings hide the most beautiful new beginnings.